Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Home Built Workshop. For those of you that are content creators, maybe you're a musician, a podcaster, a YouTuber, or some other form of electronic media, this will be an all too familiar sight. A tangled mess of headphone cables, microphone cables, extension cords, all sorts of cables, all tangled up in your workspace. So, in this episode, we're going to build this. A headphone and cable organizer rack. So let's head out into the shop and get to work. So the first thing I did for this project was built a mock-up to hold only one pair of headphones. We want to hold three, but the reason I made a mock-up was just to test all my curves and to make sure everything was going to work like I thought it was. The mock-up worked great, so we're gonna make this a little bit longer to hold three pairs of headphones. The first thing we're going to do is glue up 3 pieces of wood to make this wide piece here. If you don't have some small scraps, which is what I'm using, you could just use 2 pieces of 3/4 inch lumber glued together just so you can get this depth right here.
We started out on the table saw, cutting our scrap pieces down to length.
Alright, so now that we've got our pieces cut to length, just apply some glue and a good coat.
We'll spread it out evenly, and then we'll clamp it up to get a nice solid joint.
Okay. And that's that. So we got that clamped up. We'll set it aside to dry. So the next thing we want to do is mark a nice arc across the top of our piece. We'll make our arc by measuring down 1 inch on each end. And marking the center point. We're going to make our arc using one of these flexible steel rulers. The problem is, my ruler is not long enough to go across the whole piece. So we're going to do one side at a time. This is where it might get a little bit tricky. So we'll put a little clamp on one edge of our piece, and that's what's going to hold the ruler in place. So we want to position it so the ruler is right on our line. And then we'll bend the ruler to line up with our center mark. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So that when we're done, we should have a nice arc on there.
I'm going to use my scroll saw to cut out this arc. I'm not using a bandsaw because I don't have one available. The scroll saw works pretty good on this oak, especially if you have a brand new blade in there. Now I'm going to use my homemade spindle sander to clean up that arc and make sure it's nice and smooth.
Now I've got to route a profile on there. And we're going to do that outside.
On the router table, I'm using a round over bit just to make a nice profile around the outside edge of the piece. I decided that it would be easier to sand this part of the project right now, rather than once we start the assembly.
Now that we've let our glue dry overnight, we can remove our clamps. Now we'll sand it down before we cut it to size.
Now I'm going to cut all the pieces to size on the table saw. I'm just using some simple spray glue to hold the template to our pieces so that I can cut it out on the scroll saw.
Works just fine.
And back to the scroll saw to cut out all the curved pieces. then over to the drill press with a drum sander mounted in it. Now we can start the final assembly. We'll just use some wood glue and glue it together. I've put some really light pencil marks on the piece to help me line everything up when I'm actually doing the assembly. This way when I clamp it down, I can tell if it's shifted or not. Later on we'll reinforce the joints with screws.
Now that we got it all clamped up, we'll let that dry.
Now I'm going to use the exact same process to glue on the final pieces of this project. A little wood glue and some clamps, and we're set. Now we'll just wait for that glue to dry. I'll drill and countersink a couple of screw holes for mounting it, and also some reinforcing holes in the back. A quick final sanding to knock the corners down, and we're ready for finish. I'm going to finish this with some Danish oil. I really like using Danish oil because all I need to do is wipe it on and let it dry.
The only thing I don't like about the Danish oil is that you have to let it sit for 72 hours per the directions before you can put your top coat on. So we'll let it sit for a few days and then we'll finish this project up.
I chose some spray-on semi-gloss lacquer as the final top coat. I like it because it's not too glossy and gives just the right amount of shine. So there's our finished product. Our headphone rack is complete, and now keeping all of our headphones and cords up off our desk.
So thanks for watching this episode of Home Built Workshop. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any episodes. See you later. So the next part we want to do is mark a nice arc across the top of our piece. Oh, sorry, dude.
So I zoomed into a close-up since you had safety goggles on.
Oh, crap. Good call. Safety police, get me. Cut. That's a wrap.